Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Pope Leo XIV has described himself multiple times now as a son of Saint Augustine. If you take a look at his writings and his life, you actually see the prominent Augustinian influence that is manifest in his life and works, particularly in four themes. We're joined by Dr. Matthew Becklo to speak about that. Matthew is husband and father, writer and editor, publishing director for Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. His first book, The Way of Heaven and Earth, From Either Or to the Catholic Both And, is available now from Word on Fire. Matthew, I'm always glad to be able to reconnect with you. How are you doing?
Good, Marcus. Thanks for having me on again.
So, four themes of Leo XIV, particularly with his Augustinian lean. You start off by saying, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Now, unfortunately, in today's milieu, someone can tell you who they are and mean something completely different. But with Pope Leo XIV, what you see is what you get. So tell us about the framing of the understanding of the person of Leo XIV.
Yeah, and what I meant by that was he introduced himself to the world in a very distinctive way. And I think a lot of us, when we heard that name, Prevost, coming off of the Loggia, a lot of us said, who is that? I mean, he had been on my radar once, maybe twice, as a potential candidate for Pope. I didn't know all that much about him, despite his being American and me being an American. Of course, a lot of us thought there's no way that an American is gonna become Pope. So a lot of us were asking, who is this man? Well, he stood on the Loggia and told us, he said, I am a son of Saint Augustine. I am an Augustinian. And so it's very interesting that a man who has a lot of different things in his CV. I mean, he could have talked about living in Peru and being a missionary. He could have talked about, being a bishop and his work in the Vatican. And he could have even said, I am a student of St. Augustine, but he said, I am a son of St. Augustine. So this new book with Word on Fire is sort of an attempt to understand the Holy Father on his own terms.
It would be Benedict XVI was himself a student of St. Augustine. I think he would have echoed that sentiment, but Cardinal Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, is truly a son of Augustine, both in intellect and in spirit. Let's begin there. Your booklet describes this. Talk about what it is. What does it mean? What is it to say that I am a son of Augustine?
Yeah, and when you look back over his life, I included a timeline in the beginning of the book, but it's just striking how you see the name of Augustine and the order of St. Augustine running through essentially the whole of his adult life. I mean, from his education at Villanova University, which was founded by the Order of St. Augustine, to his entering the Order of St. Augustine. He writes a dissertation on the local prior of the Order of St. Augustine. And then, of course, is just working as an Augustinian missionary in Peru. He becomes a bishop and takes as his motto a line from St. Augustine, which is, in that one, we are one, in illo uno unum. And so Augustine is just running right through the whole of his life as a priest, as a bishop, and then he becomes Pope and introduces himself as a son of St. Augustine. But the point I make in the book is that we are seeing him reference Augustine time and time and time again, and the book is trying to draw in some of those references. But more importantly, you see the Augustinian charism, the Augustinian spirit coming through his papacy already.
Now, from there then, that snapshot in his references to the Bishop of Hippo, when you take it further, what you start seeing is that his interiority, his prayer life, like you rightly highlight, it really does come out as deeply Augustinian. Help us understand what that means.
Yeah, and that's the first of four themes I tried to bring out in this piece. So, of course, Augustine is the great saint who talks about the restless heart in the Confessions. He's the first to write this great spiritual autobiography, which is the searching of his life and his past and his story in this great conversation with God about who he is and who God is and what does it mean that he's been found by God and has found God. And so it's this great plunge into the heart, into the life of the heart. And so the Augustinian spirit, the Augustinian charism is very much focused on interiority and a return to the heart. And the restless heart, I mean, Augustine, I just said in another interview the other day, could be a contemporary writer. I mean, you strip away some of the exalted prose and just encounter him in terms of the nuts and bolts of his story. This is a contemporary story about a restless soul who's searching for truth. He's searching for happiness in the world, and he finds God. And it's this just striking, beautiful story about a restless heart encountering God. And so already in his papacy, Pope Leo has been emphasizing this theme to young people, especially to seminarians. He's encouraged people to return to the heart and to direct the restless heart toward God.
Let's dive deeper into that question of the restless heart, considering today's day and age too. Pope Leo XIV has demonstrated in his words and writings he's very attuned to the way modern man is in terms of his anxiety and the continued separation of the culture from God. So speak to how that reality of the restless heart really does communicate him touching the heart of his fellow man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this segues nicely into the second motif I point out in the piece, which is clarity and the emphasis on truth. So it's one thing to acknowledge the restless heart, but if you're doing that without a sense of, well, what are we ordered to? What is our heart ordered for? You're just going to be going in circles, and you're not really going to resolve the restless heart. So Leo has this real strong emphasis on truth that comes through time and time again. I mean, pouring through a lot of his older writings and speeches, the ones I could find anyway that were out there, you do see the word truth come up in a powerful way. So he's very in tune to the importance of truth and the fact that what the restless heart is seeking is truth. And as modern man, postmodern man, unhinges himself from the truth of God and from the truth of his Son and from life in the church, he's going to lose that anchor in truth. And we might get little glimpses of truth here and there, but we're losing that capital T truth. And the result is just disorientation. And again, the restless heart just goes on unresolved.
And so dive deeper into that question of clarity, because one of the main reasons, if you read Augustine's Confessions, his heart is restless because he completely doesn't have clarity on what he is, what he's made for, who he is, and therefore what he's called to.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Augustine is swept up into the Manichaean movement, which is this Gnostic vision of reality, and he's learning a lot. He's entering into becoming a rhetorician, and he's very educated, and he's dealing with these great speakers and orators, and really becoming somebody in the world. And at the same time, experiencing all these dalliances and relationships and pleasure seeking, and he's a man of the world, but he's just not finding that center. He's not finding that truth, that experience of rest. And we find that rest, Augustine finds that rest finally in God. And so the Confessions, again, is just such a contemporary story. I'd encourage all your listeners, if they haven't read it, to get out and get a copy, especially now that we have an Augustinian in the chair of Peter. It's a great time to return to this story.
I couldn't agree more, actually. This is a good time for everyone to procure a copy of Augustine's Confessions. I would greatly personally recommend Maria Boulding's translation, and to dive into his story and actually enter into the struggle of Augustine's interiority, which brings us back to the first thing that you brought to our attention. We're going to end this segment, Matthew. How can people find out more about Leo XIV's Augustinian spirit?
If you want to get this book, we're giving it for $3 a copy plus shipping, or you can get a box of 20 if you wanted to get it for a small group or for your parish. If you search I Am a Son of Saint Augustine book, Word on Fire should bring it up. I think the URL is wordonfire.org/Leo-book.
My guest is Dr. Matthew Becklo. He is publishing director for Word on Fire Catholic Ministries, primarily a husband and father, writer and editor, brilliant, systematic mind, but also a man who's got a deep heart for the church and for Christ. And he's talking to us about the heart of Pope Leo XIV, which is deeply Augustinian. Continuing on the other side of the break, stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Augustine. I'm talking with Matthew Becklo, husband and father, writer and editor, publishing director for Word and Fire Catholic Ministries. Matthew, I want to pick up where we had left off. You were just beginning to dive deeper into the question of clarity that feeds into the third theme of charity.
Yes, and I'm glad you dropped the doctor. I was going to mention that if I'm
I'm sorry.
doctor of anything, it's faking it till you make it. That's my PhD.
I'm sorry about that, brother. I apologize, but go on, please.
Yeah, I'll take it. So yes, clarity and charity, of course, go together in the Catholic faith. And again, I think you find this in Leo that, of course, as Catholics, we're called to speak the truth in love, right? We don't want to separate the truth of the faith from love. God is love, but God is also the truth. And you find that the closer you get to God, the more that these things come together and they converge. The more that you are close to God as truth, you're close to the reality of His love. And so charity is another important theme in Augustine, and therefore in the son of Saint Augustine and Pope Leo. I mentioned you see in his coat of arms the emblem of the Order of Saint Augustine, which is a red heart, a flame pierced with an arrow. So this is symbolizing the love of God that inflames our hearts toward love for Him and then love for others for His sake. And so, of course, Augustine says this is the foundation of the city of God in his masterpiece, is that it's the love of God even at the expense of the love of self, whereas the earthly city is the love of self at the expense of the love of God. And so love is at the heart of the gospel for Leo.
In that expression of love, and therefore in a true Augustinian spirit, love isn't what modern man would think love is. For the Augustinian reality, for the Catholic reality, love in willing the good of the other draws and compels one to deeper conversion away from a base way of living into the higher way of living, which is the way of God.
Yeah, and this is such an important point. And that's why, in my opinion, when we talk about love, we always need to say in the same breath the truth. And in fact, the truth has to have a certain primacy, because without that sense of truth, we don't even know how to define love, right? So to say love is the willing of the good of the other is an expression of the truth of what love is. And so God reveals the truth of love in His Son and calls us into that love. There's no word more thrown around today and can mean so many different things than love. But we have the truth of the faith which orients us to the truth of love. And those things, again, beautifully come together in Augustine. I think probably more often he's seen as a theologian of the heart, whereas somebody like Aquinas would be seen as a theologian of the mind. But of course, Augustine was also a brilliant philosopher. He just wrote so many books about all kinds of deep philosophical and theological subjects. So the mind and the heart come together in him and therefore in Pope Leo.
Let's address that just a little deeper, if you don't mind. It's so easy to err on extremes. On the one hand, it is really true that the life of virtue is nothing more than the continued conformity of the intellect into the life of God so that all other powers can find their right ordering. We can talk about it theoretically, but we can err on extremes, right? It's so easy to do so. Either we become overtly studious about the faith and forget about the depth of our person as ought to belong to God. And on the other hand, we can swing to the other extreme and think that the heart is all emotive and nothing else. And that's garbage too.
Yes, absolutely. Taking one at the expense of the other is always the mistake. And as we've talked about before, the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, is always saying both and keeping these things together. So you do find Catholics, unfortunately, that make of the faith a kind of systematized set of ideas and rules and this sort of thing. But you also find people on the other side who lampoon the faith in that way whenever we talk about truth. And that's not true either. I mean, we need doctrine, we need dogma, we need the revelation of the truth. As we read in the New Testament itself, we need sound doctrine, because it's from sound doctrine that our love kind of takes its point of departure, and it each acts as a check on the other. again, I think you see this beautifully in Augustine, who I think is unfairly lampooned, by the way, as a sort of pessimistic, dour thinker, but he's actually wonderfully balanced in a lot of ways.
You know what's unfair? Anyone who reads him, really reads him, especially if you begin with the Confessions and move forward, you get that heart. Your heart can't help but soar with his. And
absolutely.
So it's surprising to me that he's earned that kind of a reputation in modernity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it has to do with this issue of love and more generally in terms of original sin and in terms of the body. I think a lot of people maybe look askance at him because of his Manichaean past and think that maybe, or even his Neoplatonic training, that some of this is shaping sort of the way he sees human nature. In my experience, I mean, I'm not an Augustine scholar by any means. I've read some of him. I'm working my way through the City of God, which is so long, but it's just fantastic. But I don't get that impression at all. I think time and time again, Augustine is this wonderfully balanced thinker and very much embracing of the human person and human nature. And again, I think we're seeing that in Leo. I think he's proving himself to be a very balanced thinker. And to anticipate the last point a little bit, he's a unifier, is my sense so far. He's trying to draw the church together.
I don't mean to deviate the conversation too much, but I love that you brought up the City of God, because considering a lot of present, like very current global political issues that have recently happened, I genuinely have been thinking, gosh, everyone really ought to read the City of God, because the outrage on multiple facets of the extremes just demonstrate that we've lost the capacity to think rightly about issues, and we give in to knee-jerk reactions so easily.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I've had this sense, as I mentioned, I was reading the City of God, actually, in preparation for writing my book on the Catholic both and, but I didn't quite finish it, and I'm still working my way through it. But as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, if you carefully read and studied this book, it would almost give you an entire education in Western history and Western philosophy and theology. I mean, everything is in there, and he's anticipating a lot of the issues that we're even seeing today. I mean, human nature doesn't change in certain fundamentals. So, think of the anecdote in the beginning where it talks about Alexander the Great encountering the pirate. And this is something that Leo XIV has referenced himself in saying that, well, just because you do it in the name of an empire, you're called a great king. And, because I do it, I'm called a criminal. And Augustine says, well, what is a great kingdom but a, group of criminals under this great, exalted title? It's dealing with these really tense geopolitical questions in a really insightful way, and it's dynamics that we're seeing play out even now.
Now, drawing back then to some of the other themes that you bring up that's very Augustinian in Leo XIV's life, let's talk about charity and the last theme, unity.
Yes, so charity, again, is the burning heart of the love of God, and it's I think importantly for Leo, talks about if we love God, we have to love our brother and sister. That again, the two go hand in hand. And he's talked about this. If you look it up, I think it was a 2012 interview with Catholic News Service. He talks about Augustine's Confessions at length in a video interview, and he talks about how a lot of people want to say, "Well, I've had an experience of God," and sort of keep it private. Again, interiority is important, but it's not everything, because we have that experience of God, and it's supposed to flow out in works of love. So love for God and love for our neighbor going hand in hand. And that segues into that theme of unity. So Augustine, leading up to the conclave, this is funny, there was a New York Times piece that had a headline saying, "As cardinals prepare to elect a pope, one motto is unity. That's divisive." And I read that and thought, well, that's ridiculous, because unity is, anyone who knows Catholic theology and the Catholic Church knows that unity is just elemental to who we are. And it's strange that it would be presented as this, I don't know, I guess they were saying it was a sort of a conservative movement, and under the banner of unity. Well, as I say in the piece, it didn't age well because Leo has talked a lot about unity. And I think, again, it's just been the Catholic thing. It's been drawing people together in the unity of the church. Obviously, the culture of polarization has affected the church in a lot of negative ways. So I think we've needed somebody like Leo to step in and say, let's come together as one church, as one body, so that we can evangelize the world and bring that unity to the world.
As a final exhortation to everyone listening right now, Augustine, like you mentioned, is a copious author, and it's easy to be trepidatious of him. What's a quick introduction? So you have your booklet, which we're going to link to in the description, but how else could we start appreciating him?
That's a great question. I mean, again, the Confessions, I just think I haven't read any other translation except Frank Sheed's, which is the one we have available in through Word on Fire. Mm-hmm. And I recommend it highly. It's just beautiful. And I think give yourself some time. It might be a little bit tough to get into, but if you fight through it, some of the language, and work your way through it, I mean, I just think that's going to open up Augustine's life and Augustine's heart and mind and really draw you into the life of this great saint. City of God, obviously is very, very long, as we talked about before, but you can pick up, certain excerpts from that book as well. And then, there's a great website called New Advent, which has all kinds of homilies and different letters that he wrote. You can just search Augustine at New Advent and poke around there as well.
Matthew, always a tremendous joy. I'm looking forward to future conversations. My guest has been Matthew Becklo, husband and father, writer and editor, publishing director for Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. And we've been talking about the Augustinian spirit of Leo XIV. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.